Welcome everyone to Slugs and Steins, lectures from UC Santa Cruz. My name is Mike Reapy, and I'm one of your volunteer organizers tonight. With me is April Yee, a member of the UCSC Alumni Council, who will be moderating the talk with me tonight. April and I will stay on screen during the talk so that our speaker doesn't feel like he's alone in the room. This talk is being recorded. It will appear in a few days on the UCSC Arts, Lectures, and Entertainment channel on YouTube. For those who are new, our Slugs and Steins series engages a UC Santa Cruz faculty member in discussion with you, our local and extended community online, with a goal of making us all Renaissance people. We want it to feel just like you're at UC Santa Cruz, sitting in class, but with a drink in your hand and without tests. Even though this is a virtual event, I'd like to begin with the UCSC land acknowledgement. The land on which we gather is the unceded territory of the Awaswas-speaking Yupi tribe, the Amamutsan tribal band, comprised of the descendants of indigenous people taken to missions Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from historical trauma. Now, since we can't see you, we'd like to know where you're zooming in from and how many people are watching. Please take a moment to fill out a short poll that will pop up on your screen. We'll share this in a few minutes. I think we've got some results rolling in. Once those slow down, we'll put up the results. Okay, looks like 3/4 of us are just one, but we've got some couples here. And where are we coming in from? Half from Santa Cruz County, a lot from the Bay Area, 13%, 2 people coming in from other states, and 1 person from outside the US. That's pretty amazing. So, all right, so tonight we'll be tipping our steins with Jonathan Hicken. Academic turned tech entrepreneur turned social impact leader, Jonathan Hicken currently leads the Seymour Marine Discovery Center as executive director. The Seymour Center is operated by UCSC's Long Marine Laboratory, and Jonathan is affiliated with the Physical and Biological Sciences Division. He offers 2 truths and a lie. We can ask him which during Q&A. 1, he won awards for his homemade ice cream. 2, his name is on Mars. And 3, he saved a family from a burning car. So let's see which of those are true and which one's a lie. This evening, we'll be learning how the Seymour Marine Discovery Center at UC Santa Cruz catalyzes local climate action in the Monterey Bay area, and how a blue whale skeleton is becoming the headline act for that work. We'll have a detailed Q&A at the end with some Q&A in the middle as well. You can type your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen at any time. If there's a relevant question to be asked in the moment, we might pause and have Jonathan answer it at the time. So don't be afraid to post your thoughts. If you see someone else's question that you like, you can upvote it, and we'll do our best to have it be asked and answered sooner. So again, type your Q&A, type your questions at any time that they come to you in the box, and upvote if you can. That'll help us out. Okay, does everyone have their steins? Great, I've got your slug, Jonathan Hicken.
Thanks so much, Mike and April, for having me. Hello, everybody from around the world, apparently. Let me get my screen share going, and we can get started. So thanks, Mike. You teed it up awesomely, and I will answer the 2 truths and a lie during the Q&A. So just think about which of those you think was my lie. But yeah, you teed it up great. This is kind of a double feature tonight. I'm talking about 2 things. I'm going to talk about museums in general, but specifically as at the Seymour Marine Discovery Center, how we act as catalysts for local climate action, and how a blue whale skeleton is becoming the headline for the act right here in Santa Cruz. So I live in Santa Cruz. I live on the west side of Santa Cruz, just about a mile from the Seymour Center, actually in UC Santa Cruz's Coastal Science Campus. And I live here with my son. This is Damien. He's going to be 5 in September. But before coming to Santa Cruz, yeah, I was an academic. I thought I was going down the academic track myself. I was a social scientist, and I actually studied undocumented immigration from Mexico to the United States. So I'm actually pictured here conducting an ethnographic interview in a small town in central Mexico. Uh, Quickly realized that academia was not going to be for me, so it took basically the hardest turn I could take and joined a startup in Silicon Valley, where I imagine some of you are right now. Mountain View, right adjacent to the Googleplex. It was a startup called User Testing. It was kind of the classic startup story. And I had the privilege to grow with this company. Joined when it was about 5 people and left when it was about 400 people and ran a team of 100 folks during that time. But I was living in Santa Cruz and commuting over the hill, like many of you probably have done, and was starting to feel pretty disconnected from this community. It was essentially a place where I slept. And so I took a big risk, and I decided to join a really inspirational leader, someone by the name of Nina Simon, who ran the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History, someone who really inspired me personally. I said, let's go. Let's work at a museum. Let's see what happens. So for those of you who were in Santa Cruz before the Abbott Square, as you know it today, exists, I was part of the team that helped build and launch Abbott Square and kind of leading fundraising marketing during that time. So this is a plaza in downtown Santa Cruz. As you can see here, live music and a food court. And I was a part of the project team that brought that to fruition. COVID happened, but then I had this wonderful opportunity to apply for this job here at the Seymour Marine Discovery Center, bring some of my academic understanding of the academic institutions, my understanding of how to build and run a business, and how to create vibrant, inclusive educational spaces. Having an ex that was a marine biologist, I knew enough about marine biology to get my way in. So what is the Seymour Marine Discovery Center to begin with? So I'm actually going to rewind you back to the 1970s. And this is an aerial photograph of the Coastal Science Campus back when the Long Marine Lab was the first thing that was built. So those of you who've been there or who were there or maybe in school when the Long Marine Lab was the only thing at the Coastal Science Campus, you may recall that there was a big old Brussels sprout field right next door. And that was a private farm. Eventually Wells Fargo owned the land. I won't get into the full history there, but as the story goes, faculty at the Long Marine Lab and grad students would be doing their research, and folks would walk down the trails past the farm and hear some chirping and squeaking behind the fences and kind of start to peek behind. It was like, what the heck is going on back there? And so faculty and grad students would come out and greet them and tell them a little bit about the work they were doing, and specifically about that dolphin tank where they were doing some marine mammal research. And word got around town. More and more people started showing up. Eventually, school groups buses started showing up. And it was one of these organic stories where the community just kind of organically demanded education about the marine science that was happening at UC Santa Cruz. So a volunteer program sprouted up. And sure enough, some of you may remember there was this trailer next to the Long Marine Lab, and they had a couple of tanks in there. And that was the demand grew and grew and grew, and more school groups started coming to the point where Gary Griggs and Steve Davenport and Dave Casper and a couple other leaders of the Coastal Science Campus at that time thought, we better raise some money and build this thing for real. So sure enough, in 2000, the Seymour Marine Discovery Center was built. The community raised about $5 million to build this building. And in early 2000, the doors were opened. And so this is the UC Santa Cruz Coastal Science Campus from above today. The building in kind of the top left corner, that's the Seymour Marine Discovery Center. And on the other side of the street, on the right side, that's the Long Marine Lab. And you're looking at the Monterey Bay up above. It's this incredible location. It's an aquarium. It's a science museum where for decades we've been demonstrating and sharing the marine science, particularly from the Institute of Marine Sciences, that has been happening at UC Santa Cruz, one of the world's leading marine science institutes. So we have the privilege of sharing that science with this public, with kids, with families from all around the region and beyond who are interested in this science. So in the Seymour Marine Discovery Center, we've got an aquarium pictured here, a couple of our student employees who are doing a deep clean on our Rocky Reef tank. And we've got, no aquarium would be complete without some jellies. We've got a very charismatic octopus on display at the moment. And one of the highlights of the experience at the Seymour Center is our swell shark tank, where you actually do have the opportunity to touch a shark. The good news is that these sharks are nocturnal, so they're sleeping when you touch them. They do have teeth. They would bite, but they're sleeping. And we, in 25 years, have never had an incident. So you can come in, you can touch a shark. And it's really cute, actually. A lot of kids are really, really nervous to touch it. It takes them a couple of visits before they're ready to touch the shark. And the aquarium is just one element of the educational experiences we offer at the Seymour Center. There's also what we call the dry exhibit area, where we rotate exhibits in and out that demonstrate the science that's happening at UC Santa Cruz, and try to offer interactive activities and hands-on learning opportunities for families, particularly kids. I'll get into more about that in a little bit. But for those 25 years, another core program has been engaging with our youth. And we have two flagship programs, and have for 25 years. And that is a kind of a daily field trip. You guys might remember doing field trips when you were in elementary school. Every day we got two kids during the school year. We got 2 classes a day coming in. They spend a couple hours with us, and we do a deep dive where they actually get to get in a real science lab environment, and they get to play scientists for the day and really feel like what it's like to be a marine scientist and interact with some of these species in the tank. And right now, actually, at this very moment, we have our summer camp going on, and this is called Ocean Explorers. Likewise, it's been running for 25 years. And some of the older kids actually get to go back into the marine mammal lab and interact with the marine mammals back here, the dolphins and the seals and sea lions and whatnot. So for 25 years, over 1 million people have come through these doors. And 150,000 young people have gone through our formal youth programs. But to me, while those numbers are big and those numbers are impressive, what really matters, look, we're in the business of creating scientists. That's what we do, right? These kids come in, and our objective here is that these kids walk away with the desire, the passion, the energy to go out and pursue an education or pursue a career in the sciences, in the marine sciences. And pictured here is Jessie Kendall Barr, who I actually saw this morning. She was walking by and I waved to her on campus. And this is a picture taken in 2002. I think she's about 12 years old here. She was participating in that summer camp, that very summer camp I just told you about. And she got to take her photo with the dolphin there. You can see shaking the dolphin's fin or flipper. This is Jessie late last year. Jessie made the New York Times for a study she did on elephant seal sleep. She is a rising star in the field of marine sciences. She currently works at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. I am a UC San Diego graduate myself, so I like to see Jessie doing that. Jessie credits her initial passion to that summer camp. And she decided to pursue that career, to pursue that education. And she's doing it. 20 years later, she's doing it. So sometimes the impact we have takes decades. But we always ask ourselves, are we ready? When that youngster walks in, are we ready for them? Are we ready to make sure we create them into a scientist? And that the next Jessie Kendall Barr or Roxanne Beltran, pictured here. Roxanne was a student employee with us, and she is now a rising superstar at UC Santa Cruz. I don't know if you've gotten a lecture from her, Mike, but if you haven't, you should. Okay, awesome. Roxanne is a Seymour Center alumna herself. And she also credits her time at the Seymour Center to influencing her path. So these are the stories that really move me. These are the reasons that I get up in the morning. And this is our mission, right? This is our mission boiled down to a pretty simple, in simple terms, is to educate people about science's role in understanding and conserving the ocean. Okay, so let's dig into this first word. Let's dig into people for a second. And this is where we're going to start talking about where Seymour Center is headed and how we're going to start catalyzing local climate action. Let's think about people. I want to share a little personal story. So this was last fall. I'm riding down West Cliff Drive with my son right there in the yellow helmet. And we're riding down West Cliff. I'm having a proud dad moment because he taught himself how to ride a bike. I didn't need to push him or anything. And we stopped because we were seeing some humpback whales breaching right there, maybe a couple hundred yards offshore. So we stopped, and of course we're watching this. And I looked to the west, and I saw plumes of smoke rising in the distance. Sure enough, there was a prescribed burn happening at Wilder Ranch. And I looked to the east, and I saw bright orange barricades and chain link fences and excavators. Some of you may have seen the work being done right there on West Cliff Drive to repair the road in the wake of the storms of January 2023. The damage that there was a ton of damage on West Cliff Drive, as well as some businesses in Capitola, and property in Capitola. And I just stopped and I took stock of just how relevant this ocean was, this environment was, this coast was to my and my son's daily life. These were things, there was smoke in the air, there were detours on the road, there were whales jumping, and there was a beautiful ocean. My job itself is directly connected to the ocean. So the ocean is so deeply relevant to me. And it really started, really, this is a fundamental sort of tenet to the way we think about the work we do, is making sure that everything that we share is relevant to the people who live, work, and learn in Santa Cruz. So look, the ocean itself, the Monterey Bay, it is, some people call it one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. It's deeply embedded in our culture here. I mean, we're in one way or another, we're all here because of the ocean for some reason, right? For some of us, it's because we love to go hiking in the redwood forests. How's that connected to the ocean? Well, because redwood forest wouldn't exist without the fog. Some of us enjoy the ocean for recreation. There's surfers. I got to imagine there's some surfers on the line right now. There's a lot of recreation that happens. Some of us, our economic livelihood depends on the ocean. Pictured here, we've got a crab fisher who depends on the take and is struggling right now with all of these crab season closures and the different fisheries that have been closing due to some environmental policies. And for some of us, our connection to the coast goes back thousands of years. So pictured here is the Amamutsan Land Trust. This is the native stewards of the land. The Amamutsan pictured here have a coastal and ocean stewardship program. They are connected to this place in a deep way that few of us can really truly understand. So that's when we think about relevance, we think about how do we get people educated about what's going on in the ocean and the coast. We got to make it relevant to their personal lives, right? When they walk out their front door, they understand, or when they walk into our building and they see the content that we're sharing, they immediately understand how that content is relevant to their lives when they walk out their front door. Let's talk about the second piece for a second. Understanding and conserving. This is the second piece of our mission, understanding and conserving. And I actually want to talk about the very nature of science itself. So when this mission was written, this was in the mid-90s when that mission was written, the science, our understanding of the ocean 30 years ago, by nature, by the very, very essence of science, has evolved and deepened and gotten more nuanced in those 30 years. From the Gary Griggses and the Ken Norrises to the current day Dan Costas and Roxanne Beltrans, so much has changed. And our understanding of both the nature of the ocean and the creatures that live in it and rely on it, but also the threats that the ocean itself faces and the creatures themselves face. Those things have evolved because we've done a great job of studying it and understanding it better. Likewise, and in a very connected way, the very nature of ocean conservation action itself has also evolved in 30 years. So maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you may remember, and actually some of the ocean conservation successes, major national state legislation started in Santa Cruz, right? I mean, some of the sanctuary work, some of the Marine Mammal Protection Act work, I mean, that really started in this community. And there were tremendous successes. I mean, there are not oil rigs in the Monterey Bay because of some of the work that happened right here in Santa Cruz. And because of those great successes, and because of the evolved understanding of the ocean and the threats that it faces, conservation action has also changed. So versus 30 years ago, 40 years ago, where we were thinking about oil rigs and pollution and whatnot, today there are marine focused organizations who are applying for $100 million grants right in our community that are focused on things like coastal climate resilience. And that's where the effort, that's where the energy is headed right now. Both on campus at UC Santa Cruz, there's this whole new Center for Coastal Climate Resilience. I believe you guys may have heard from Mike Beck, the director of the Center for Coastal Climate Resilience. UC Santa Cruz is going all in on this topic, coastal climate resilience. And meanwhile, right here in our community, public agency leaders, nonprofit leaders, everybody who's thinking about and working on the environment, doing the boots on the ground conservation action, is also thinking about adaptation, mitigation, and resilience to the impacts of climate change. So when you put that all together, how do you create a space? How do you create an experience, an educational experience, where you're educating people in a way that's relevant to them about the science's role in understanding and conserving the ocean in 2024 and in the near to midterm future? That's what you're going to find at Seymour Center today. That's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to show you. That's why we have made a major transformation in the exhibit hall as of October of last year. When you come to the Seymour Center today, you're going to learn about the impacts of climate change right here in our community. You're going to learn about what happened in January of 2023. You're going to learn that it was because of a bomb cyclone out in the Pacific, which is essentially a Pacific hurricane, that is happening more frequently as a result of the change in ocean conditions. And when bomb cyclones happen in that particular space, it sends a wave, it sends a pulse at our community from a very particular angle, an angle that's pretty unusual for Santa Cruz, a swell direction that's pretty unusual for us. And when the wave comes to our coast from that angle, it passes through this little channel underwater where there are no reef structures to slow down the wave. Normally, the normal angle it comes in, the wave comes in, it hits these rocky reef structures, it slows down the wave power, less power reaches the cliffs. But because it came from this direction, from the cyclone, it bypassed all those rocky reefs and delivered all of its power right to the shore in a way that it normally doesn't. And we're expecting that to happen more often because we're expecting bomb cyclones in that part of the ocean to happen more often. So that's the kind of thing you're going to learn when you come to the center. And you're going to learn about why did the levee in Pajaro River flood a few months after that? What happened there? And you're going to learn not just about the science behind what happened, but you're going to learn about the solutions that are on the table for our community right now. In fact, I'm going to back up a slide, I love this solution. There's a Professor Andy Fisher, another scientist who I highly recommend you hear from if you haven't yet. Andy is working on a project in the Pajaro Valley, which would be reclaiming natural floodplains. And in doing so, you will essentially allow the water to spread out and sink into the ground. So instead of this big storm dumping all this water and shooting it down this channel, where it's hitting that urban levee with a ton of force and a ton of debris, because we've channeled it down these really narrow paths, you allow the water to spread out and flood the floodplains. It slows it down. It reduces the volume of coming down the river. It spreads out the debris, and less force hits that urban levee. Now, the levee actually needed repairs for 30 years, so there's that issue too. But when you come in, you're going to learn about that solution of reclaiming natural floodplains. You're going to learn about the individuals and the heroes in our community, like the gentleman pictured here, who are working on developing climate-resistant crops, right? So farmers down in South County and in the Monterey Bay region are having to experiment with new crops because the soil conditions, the air conditions are changing. And so the crops that have thrived for so long are starting to struggle. So they're already starting to implement solutions. And there are heroes around our community who are implementing solutions and discovering these solutions. And the great news is there are a lot of solutions on the table for us. And so we have the opportunity to share what those solutions are. And it's not just nonprofits and it's not just public agencies who are doing this hard work. There are businesses too. So that right here, there is a surfboard that is 3D printed from recycled hospital trays. So this is a company based out of the Wrigley building, just close to the Coastal Science campus. And on the right side, you're seeing some cruise foam. Now, this is another local company who has figured out an alternative to traditional packing styrofoam, and it's essentially made from discarded shrimp shells. So again, this is reducing the amount of waste and the amount of plastic that's entering the ocean to innovative local companies who have real solutions. And they're working on it today. And of course, the scientists themselves who are doing the behind the scenes work. I mean, these people's kids go to school with our kids, and we see them at the grocery stores. And when they're at work, they're uncovering some of the most difficult to understand dynamics, climate dynamics. But more importantly, these people are passionate about finding and implementing solutions in coastal communities around the world, especially in Santa Cruz County. So when you put that all together, that's what you find at the Seymour Center. You're finding hands-on experiences like this wave tank, where kids get to actually experiment with wave dynamics. You're going to come to Seymour Center, you're going to discover workshops where you can build the skills to the little impacts, the individual impacts, where you can build the skills to develop a more resilient community for yourself. And you're also going to find collective action opportunities, like a campaign we participated in last year in partnership with the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation, who has a campaign to get large shipping vessels to slow down as they approach busy ports like San Francisco and Santa Barbara. And so we put this campaign, we partnered with them, and we put an opportunity for our visitors to write letters in support of this campaign. And we generated thousands of letters. And each of those, and we sent those letters to the companies to help our partner advance their campaign. And those little moments of collective action help us feel like we're bigger than bigger than ourselves, a part of something bigger. And so we're offering those opportunities to take action right here in our community and beyond at every station in the Seymour Center. And of course, all of that is going to be presented alongside the things that will always be the most popular and the most beautiful, is the aquarium. And the aquarium is not going everywhere. And we're finding ways to connect the live animals you see to these stories and these questions and solutions for coastal climate resilience right here at home. And all of this in a vibrant and inclusive gathering space where everybody can be a scientist. So that the next million people who come in, they're not just learning about the dolphins and the sea lions, which, don't get me wrong, are wonderful and we should share about, but they're also learning about the real solutions on the table for a coastal community like ours, so that we can create a more resilient coastline in the face of the impacts of climate change. And so that the next Jessie Kendall Barr that walks through our doors may decide, she may decide to go pursue a PhD in marine science and study seals, or she may decide to pursue engineering, or she may decide to pursue another field that one day will give her the opportunity to make a real impact on her coastal community. And so that's the way that we are making, catalyzing local climate change impact right here in Santa Cruz County. And I would love to hear your thoughts or questions about part one of this presentation.
So far, there aren't any questions yet, but folks, please feel free to enter them. So you mentioned Abbott Square, and the Alumni Council actually did have an event there for counselors just to meet. And I hadn't been there before that. I think that was in 2019, maybe, or I can't remember when we first went, but it's so fun. It's like such a great space. I think it's a really great addition to downtown Santa Cruz. So thank you for your efforts in that. And we did have Roxanne Beltran speak, I think in February. Was it February? It was earlier this year. And she talks about the elephant seals. So that was a really fun talk too.
Which actually a lot of her work, she I don't know if she talked about this, but they place these little tags on the elephant seals' heads.
Yeah.
And these elephant seals go on these massive migrations. I mean, thousands and thousands of miles. And they're actually collecting important information about the ocean condition itself, things like temperature and salinity and pH and all that stuff, which is being fed into a lot of our climate models. So the elephant seals in some ways are research partners in our understanding of ocean dynamics and climate change.
Oh, got it. Yeah, that's really cool. And then I just had a question. You mentioned the campaign about having container ships slow down. What are the issues when they don't do that? And if they slow down, what are the benefits?
Two primary benefits. One, ships, so ship strikes, these large vessels, when they're coming in fast, they're essentially perpendicularly crossing whale migration routes, and so they're hitting whales and severely injuring or killing whales. So by slowing down, it gives both the ship and the whale an opportunity to avoid that collision. And the second thing is actually has to do with air quality. So the closer, these ships are burning massive amounts of fossil fuels. And if they slow down, they're actually becoming more efficient as they approach our coast. And it has a positive effect on our air quality.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's really important. Mike, did you want to take the question in the Q&A box?
Oh, we do have some questions coming in. Wonderful. And I think maybe Roxanne Beltran was October, November, I'm thinking.
Oh, really? I thought it was this year.
Now's our chance. We can go to Arts Lectures and Entertainment YouTube channel and rewatch that at any time, because we did record that one. Yeah, she was fantastic. Okay, we have a question from Lucille. Is there a connection to the Santa Clara Predatory Bird Center that supports the Falcon cams on the San Jose City Hall?
No, we don't have a formal partnership with that group. I'm familiar with their work. I'm a big fan. I personally follow Annie, the peregrine falcon, at the Cal campus. But there is a lot of predatory bird research happening at UC Santa Cruz. In fact, our scientists right here on campus played a big role in helping peregrine falcons rebound after DDT use threatened their species.
There's a question from Tom. Do you know if there is ongoing work with the dolphins related to climate change?
So yes, in fact, so for those of you who don't know, there at the Long Marine Lab, there is a tank, a large marine mammal tank, currently with 2 dolphins in it, 2 Atlantic bottlenose dolphins in it, and they primarily focus on physiology. This particular research project, and one of the things that they're studying right now is heat dissipation. So essentially, how do dolphins regulate their heat? And what impact does it have on their fitness and livelihood and all the other things? So they're getting a basic understanding of how marine mammals regulate their internal temperature. And the idea being, like, we know that the ocean is warming, and we don't know how that's going to impact marine mammal fitness. We already know that it's impacting their movement, their migration. For example, we know that whales are beginning their southward migration from Alaska, essentially down to Baja. Think of the gray whale migration from Alaska to Baja, California. They're starting that migration a little later than they used to because it's staying warmer a little longer. And actually, that's the reason for a lot of you may have heard about whales getting tangled up in crab lines in Monterey Bay. It's actually because of this delay. The whales are showing up at a different time than they used to, which more coincides with our crabbing season. So that's why there's been more whale entanglements. Anyway, we know that the warming ocean is changing migration behaviors. We don't yet fully understand how it's going to change their physiology and their fitness. And so right now, that's one of the studies being conducted at the Terry Williams lab.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll point out, like, of course, the impact on the crab fishery and also the salmon fishery has a huge local economic impact. So that's another direct cause and effect between climate change and economy, right?
That's right. In fact, we're working on one of our rotating exhibits is going to be about fishery closures.
Okay.
We hope to have that up sometime by the end of the summer.
I've got one question as well. I'm sort of interested in, like, the human side of the museum. Like, I think of the Seymour Center as like the exploratorium of marine biology, right? And there they have a staff of hundreds of people coming up with exhibits. And I can't imagine when you opened up this little trailer, or even after you opened up the museum, that that the scientists are in there creating the exhibits. I mean, how did the exhibits get created, and how's that changing? Like, they brought in an executive director.
Yeah, great question. So this is actually a challenge that a lot of science museums face. because traditional exhibits, and I think that this happened at the Seymour Center prior to my time, traditional exhibits are expensive to build, and there's a high cost of turning them over, right? There's a high investment in them. It takes time, it takes money to turn them over, and the implication is that exhibits can remain for a very long time. And that can hurt a museum's ability to bring visitors back, right? So you got to keep things fresh. So one of the things that we're attempting to do is we're attempting to solve that problem by creating highly iterable exhibit modules. So we've designed 4 stations in the center, which would take us, if we sprinted, we could turn something over in probably 3 to 4 weeks for less than $1,000, so that we can be responsive to the things that are happening in the community. So we actually have we're in experimental phase. We're experimenting with this solution. So those of you who are in tech, we're applying some of that iterative development approach to this. And we launched some prototypes, and they're out on the floor now, and we're testing them. So the idea is, how do you create a responsive museum that's engaging, educational, but is also something that we can easily change out? So yeah, we've designed these 4 stations to accomplish exactly that, to solve that the static problem that a lot of science museums face.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're out of questions. Why don't we move on?
Okay. All right. So, speaking of climate change, speaking of climate solutions, it just so happens that we have a headline act for this work, and we're going to try to live these values ourselves as we approach the story of Miss Blue. So Miss Blue here is a blue whale skeleton. If you've been to the Seymour Center, it's kind of hard to miss her. She's 89 feet long. We claim that she's the longest blue whale skeleton on display in the world. Some people challenge us on that, but we're sticking to our guns. And right now, what I'm going to tell you is a story of a restoration project. And I'll get to that in a second, but first I want to introduce you to Miss Blue. Miss Blue was a blue whale. Blue whales are the largest animals on Earth today. And not only that, they're the largest animals we believe that have ever existed on Earth. And so this particular blue whale washed up on Pescadero Beach, which is 20 miles north of Santa Cruz. In 1979, this is actually Miss Blue. This is a photo of her washed up on shore in 1979. 1979, we believe she was about 50 years old when she died. That's a fully grown female blue whale. We believe that she would have had calves during that time. And if she died at the age of 50 in 1979, that means she was born in the 20s, probably, which means she would have survived an intense period of whaling along our coast. So this whale was a survivor. We don't know exactly how she died. She didn't have signs of external trauma, but we don't really know. We think she probably died of natural causes. But she washed ashore in 1979. And back then, you could walk right up to it. You could climb on her. Because of the Marine Mammal Act, you can't do that anymore for washed up whales in quite the same way. But when that happened, a bunch of people on campus got just kind of hopped to it and decided they wanted to collect this animal. And I've learned so much about it. I mean, this is a really impressive kind of grassroots community thing that happened, where one person said, hey, we should collect this whale, and called a friend who had a machete, who called another friend who had a pickup truck, who called another friend who had a connection to a helicopter company. I mean, it was one of these things where all of a sudden there's just dozens of people around the community who are literally cutting this thing up and pulling the bones out and transporting it back to the Coastal Science campus. The skull was too big to carry, so they literally had to get a helicopter to airlift it off the beach and carry it to the Coastal Science campus. And so they brought the specimen back to the campus. And the way that you prepare bones to this day, the technique is that you try to get as much of the fleshy stuff as you can off, and then you bury it. And you bury it for a couple of years. And that's exactly what they did. They buried it underground for 3 or 4 years. And the reason you do that is because the microbes underground do their thing, and they eat away at the organic materials and the flesh and the muscles and the blood and whatnot and the skin. You pull it up a couple of years later, and it's pretty much cleaned off. So that's what they did. They brought it back out from underground. And since, I guess that would have been the early 80s that they pulled it out of the ground, Miss Blue has been in a couple of different locations at the Coastal Science Campus. You can kind of see in the background of this photo, there's just grassy fields back there on the top. So this is before all the development happened. And it's been mounted in actually a couple of different places. It was mounted here, adjacent to the Long Marine Lab itself. This is we've seen this photo already today, but same adjacent to the Long Marine Lab. And then it was moved and remounted adjacent to the Seymour Center. That's the Seymour Center behind the blue whale skeleton in 2000. So this is the grand opening. You see that little blue ribbon flapping about there. This was the debut of Miss Blue in her current location. And that's where Miss Blue stands today. We know that 1 million people have come through our building, but I got to imagine at least 1 million more have experienced it just going on their walks, not actually entering the center. All the students, all the faculty, everybody that's coming through casually who doesn't actually walk through our doors that we count, but everybody else. I mean, millions of people have seen Miss Blue since she's been there in various locations since the 80s. And really transformative and beautiful life moments happening in front of Miss Blue. Weddings and parties and celebrations of life and school experiences and camp experiences. So many important life moments have happened in front of Miss Blue. And she's educated and inspired and awed millions of people to more deeply understand and appreciate her species and the other marine species in Monterey Bay and beyond. This is an incredible, incredible individual creature who's been an ambassador for her species for 50 years nearly, and has done a tremendous service to us, to humanity, but also to her species, to build empathy and to build interest and passion for understanding the ocean and the creatures that live in it. Today, Miss Blue has been in her current location for about 25 years, pretty static. She's mounted on steel, and there's been some coating and some work done on her, but the bones are doing what bones do, and the bones are decomposing. And the structure itself is also at risk. So when it came to my attention about a year ago that this specimen was at risk, both the bones themselves were decomposing and the structure itself. Actually, I didn't know this at the time. We didn't know the structure was at risk, but we hired this guy, Frank Hadfield. Frank Hadfield comes from a company named Dinosaur Valley Studios. He does both extinct and extant mounts of dinosaurs and whales in museums around the world. I mean, this is one of the world's foremost expert in preserving, displaying, mounting, and shaping bone specimens. In fact, he and his company are currently working on a blue whale project at Oregon State University. And I called them up. I was like, hey, we got a blue whale problem. Who are you guys working with on your blue whale? Because I know you're working on one. So they pointed me to Frank. So we had Frank come down. And as I said, he indicated that there were two fundamental problems. The bones themselves were decaying and decomposing at a pretty rapid rate. And the metal structure holding Miss Blue up had rusted to the points that we were concerned about failure. We were concerned that it was going to fall. And that posed a safety risk to our visitors, but also posed a risk to the bones themselves. We were concerned about additional damage. So earlier this spring, we made the very difficult decision that we were going to dismantle the most risky parts of Miss Blue's exhibit. And really, that is the spine. Essentially, the kind of the latter 2/3 of the spine were mounted with galvanized steel. The rest of it was mounted with stainless steel, and the galvanized steel rusted out to the point where it became very dangerous. So we had to make the really difficult decision to lower Miss Blue to the ground. Now, before we lowered her to the ground, we had the foresight to say, hey, we better get a digital representation of Miss Blue in our hands before this thing comes down, because we don't know what's going to happen with it. We have to react to the safety concern, the safety risk. We got to do this quickly. But before that, we do that, we need to get a 3D scan of this thing, because that's going to open up a lot of doors for the work that comes next. So we reached out to a company called Halon Entertainment. This is a Hollywood computer graphics studio that has done work on major Marvel movies and Avatar and Star Wars and Jurassic Park, and has animated animals and animal-like creatures for these major movies. And we hired them. They came down and they 3D scanned Miss Blue using a technique called photogrammetry. Essentially what that is they took millions of photos of Miss Blue from all angles and got a perfect digital representation of her to less than a millimeter of accuracy. So we have a perfect representation of Miss Blue, a digital file now in our hands. And by doing that 3D scan, it gave us the opportunity to develop two things: digital experiences and a couple of really cool pathways for restoration. I just want to mention the digital experiences to you real quick, because I happen to think it's pretty cool. So this is a nice cleaned up version of Miss Blue. This is the skeleton on display. That's a perfect 3D model that's been that's been colored to look similar to what she looks like today. And we hired the same company not just to do the 3D scan, but to develop a couple of really cool experiences for our visitors. The first thing they're doing is they are modeling and they are sculpting a digital blue whale out of that skeleton, which just so happens, I learned, to be the technique that they use in real life when they're animating dinosaurs and stuff. They actually build digital skeletons of the animal and then animate that animal around this digital skeleton. So it just so happened that we had a real skeleton that they could use to model this blue whale. So they have sculpted this by hand, so to speak, and I've been working with Ari Friedlander, another scientist who I recommend you hear from if you haven't yet, who's kind of one of the world's foremost whale biologists, and he's been consulting with this company to make sure we get this sculpt perfect. And what you're going to be able to do is when you come to the Seymour Center, you're going to be able to pull out your phone, you're going to be able to look at Miss Blue, and you're going to be able to turn her into a real blue whale through the screen of your phone. This is what it'll essentially look like. It hasn't launched yet. This is coming in probably in the fall. But you'll hold your phone up to that specimen that's mounted there, slide this little slider on your phone, and see Miss Blue turn into real life. You can take pictures with her. You take pictures with your family. You can walk around her. She'll be locked in place. So you can get up close. You can look at her eyeball. You can see the coloration of her skin. But we've been able to develop this digital experience, and I couldn't help but take her on a little field trip out to the harbor. So this is Miss Blue at the Santa Cruz Harbor, one beautiful sunset a couple of weeks ago. And the other thing that we're doing is we are developing an educational experience for the youngsters that come through our field trip program. So we are using this real Miss Blue model, and the same company Halon is animating Miss Blue. This is an early rendering. This will be improved and even better by the time it's launched. But the students will actually get to learn from Miss Blue herself, from the real whale, things like how, pictured here, how they lunge feed and how they eat these giant clouds of krill. So this is modeled and animated from our actual Miss Blue skeleton. And because of that 3D scan, we've been able to develop these really cool experiences. But really what I want to talk to you today more in depth is about the restoration work. So restoration work of an animal, a specimen like Miss Blue, real organic marine mammal bone. Traditional techniques of restoration make use of things like foams and things like pictured here. This is actually some work that was done on Miss Blue in 2013 using some of these materials like foams and like some pretty gnarly plastics. And that's how the industry has been doing this for a long time. They also use, they actually use some of the same plastic that's used in these like truck bed liners, which is a very durable material. But as I mentioned, our understanding of the threats that whales face and other marine mammals and marine species face, we have a better understanding now that it has a lot to do with the decisions we've made as a society in our manufacturing, right, and our use of energy and our use of fuels. And so when we started to consider restoring this blue whale skeleton using the very manufacturing techniques and the very materials and the very technology that has created the problem in the first place, something started to not feel quite right about going down that path. The other thing is that this was a real individual animal. This was a blue whale that swam our coasts. Let me mute that. This was a real animal that swam our coasts. And this animal, if we were to take this tack, if we were to coat this skeleton in more plastic and wrap her up for the purpose of preserving her bones forever, it would essentially doom this animal to ending up in a landfill someday. And I don't think that's the right way to treat this animal. I don't think that's the right way to treat this individual creature who's had such an impact on our community and the ocean. I just fundamentally believe that is not the right way to treat this animal. So we have decided that we're going to take a new tack. We're going to try something new. And we're going to try to live our values of climate solutions. And we're going to attempt to restore Miss Blue using only climate progressive technology and manufacturing. This has never been done before. This is completely experimental. There folks like Frank from Dinosaur Valley Studios, who've been in this industry a long time, are really interested in this project. They want to make a film about it because we're trying something new and we think we may be setting a new standard for how these kinds of bones are treated. And here's a couple of examples of the way that we're going to attempt to restore this whale skeleton so that it can get back up and get back up safely. The first is we're going to attempt to use essentially the same technology as that discarded shrimp shell foam that I was describing to you a little earlier. This is Professor Marco Rolandi. He's a UCSC professor. Another guy I think you should hear from on this series. Marco is a professor on our campus. He also happens to be the scientific co-founder of a company called Cruise Foam, right? This is the company that I told you earlier that develops an alternative to packaging using a chitin, that's the compound, a chitin-based material that will biodegrade in the ocean to about like a 98% efficacy. I reached out to Marco. I said, Marco, we got this problem. I know you know chemistry. I know you know engineering. I know you have a successful company. I know you work with shrimp shells, which, by the way, whales eat essentially tiny little versions of shrimp. And I said, Marco, would you be willing to help me think about this? And just so happens that Marco grew up in Italy and went to a museum growing up when he was a kid. And there was a whale skeleton on display at this museum that he went to. And he remembers that museum so fondly, he said, I'll help you think about this. So we raised $30,000 together. And Marco, as of this week, is actually beginning to experiment with a similar, not the same, but a similar compound as what's used in Cruise Foam. So we are essentially attempting to develop a proprietary chitin-based, shrimp shell-based bone filler that we can use to repair broken bones. We're experimenting with that right now. It'll take a couple of weeks to get something in our hands, but we're going to start slapping it on some bones and testing it sometime in the summer. Another company is the surfboard company that I mentioned to you earlier as well. This is a local company called Swell Cycle. Swell Cycle, again, a local company. This is actually a surfboard company. And they develop 3D printed surfboards because, as it so happens, the way that surfboards are shaped and made and sold is very similar to the way that like whale bones and dinosaur bones are repaired and built in the industry today. It's a really similar process. They carve foam, they coat it in plastic, they coat it in resin, they coat it in glass. It's kind of the same process. So Swell Cycle developed a surfboard company to 3D print surfboards, which essentially cuts the waste out of the project, cuts the foam out, cuts all the nasty stuff out. And this is actually a graphic taken from their website. Their 3D printed surfboards, which come from, again, recycled hospital trays, can get at up to an 80% reduction in waste from a traditional surfboard. We believe that it's a similar ratio for developing a replicated blue whale bone as well. We could reduce the amount of waste, and we can get waste out of our own landfill because we're going to be sourcing hospital trays from local hospitals. Now, Swell Cycle also is at the Wrigley building, which is fully solar powered. So this is a company that is kind of walking the walk. talking the talk, and developing a circular economy approach to their business, where they're reclaiming plastic out of the landfill. They're shredding it up. They're creating 3D print filament from it. They're printing surfboards, which themselves, and now whale bones, which themselves can be shredded back when their life has come to an end, shredded back, turned back into filament, and printed again. So we are going to attempt to print replicas using that 3D scan to create replicated bones. And in fact, we already have one. So this is a photo from literally just this morning, a couple hours ago. This is a project team here that's kind of helping think through this project. And on the ground there, you can see a 3D printed whale vertebra. That is one of the vertebrae that's highly damaged. We actually got a scan of it before a lot of damage occurred, luckily. And we were able to 3D print that bone from recycled hospital trays. We also have leads. We're gonna move forward with those two solutions first. But we have a lead on a concrete company. Again, a local alum, Brent Constance, who has a company called Blue Planet, who develops carbon sequestering concrete. So essentially pulls carbon out of the atmosphere and stores it in the concrete, essentially until that concrete gets broken up again, which hopefully is never in a lot of cases. And we're going to attempt to use some of that concrete in laying any footing that we need to do. We've even talked about casting some of the bones in this concrete. We have a conversation with a clean steel company underway. And actually another company, Brent Constance's first company, he figured out a way to do human bone repair using coral exoskeleton. So I've reached out to Brent also to see if there's an application of coral in the restoration of Miss Blue's bones as well. Now, folks, the idea here is not just to restore a blue whale. It's not just to continue the impact that Miss Blue has had in terms of inspiring millions of people about the ocean, or millions of people about her species, the blue whale species. If you can imagine, we restore this magnificent being using only the technologies I've described today. This display has a whole new story to tell. All of these kids, these hundreds and thousands of kids that come through, we get to look them in the eye and say, we restored this whale using the kinds of technology that our society needs to adopt in order to solve the biggest existential threat to the ocean and to blue whales today, which is our own use of fossil fuel energies and our own manufacturing practices. We've walked the walk, and we've demonstrated that we can use that technology in an educational and an effective way. And you kids, you are going to be the ones that are the next engineers and the next scientists who are finding these solutions and deploying these solutions and developing these solutions. It's going to be you. So it's not just about understanding the ocean and the threats. It's about taking action. And it's about being innovators like our campus has done for decades and decades. And so that the next Jessie Kendall Barr who walks through our doors may choose a path in the marine sciences. And if she does, amazing. But I really hope that when Miss Blue is back in place and Seymour Center is sharing solutions to the impacts of local climate change in the best way that we possibly can, that Jessie Kendall Barr is inspired to become a solution maker and to become the generation that we need to really solve the problems that face coastal communities today. So that's how museums are catalyzing local climate action, and that's what we're doing at the Seymour Marine Discovery Center. Thank you so much, Mike and April, for having me. Thank you, everybody online, for listening today. And I would welcome any questions that you may have about Miss Blue or the first section as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jonathan. If there are any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. I actually was wondering about, the skeleton was up for 25 years. I was wondering about like, how is the bone composition being affected? And you definitely answered that question very in depth. It's so interesting, the methodologies that are being used to help with that. And I'm just curious, like, did you have funding for that, or did you have to like apply for funding for that? How did you kind of pitch that to funders?
Yeah, great question. I can expand on the first part of your question of kind of the bone decomposition and decay. Yeah, so it is, as you can see from the photos, it's totally uncovered, right? So UV and weather are the main reasons for the decay. And you know, when Miss Blue was first built or first mounted, she out of best intentions in our understanding of these specimens at the time, she was coated in layers of paint and some other things like Bondo, which is essentially like an automotive compound. And unfortunately, the result is that we trapped moisture inside of these shells. And it wasn't, and essentially, so a lot of these bones essentially sat in water for decades. We probed one of the mandibles, which is a 20-foot bone. We probed it with a little hole, and it drained water for, I mean, it must have been 10 gallons. It drained for hours. So unfortunately, despite our best intentions in trying to preserve the animal, we think we actually made things a little worse by coating her and trapping that water in. So we're gonna attempt to not make quite the same mistake again. And we're also beginning to accept the reality that these bones are doing what bones do, and they're going to decay. And the eventuality of Miss Blue, I believe, is I don't know how long it's going to take, but eventually Miss Blue will be completely replicated. It could be 50 years from now. We're going to attempt to keep as much of the real bone as we can as we go. But we are not going to, a forever blue whale bone is not the objective. Education and solution making is the objective. So that's what happened on the decomposition side. On the the methodology side, honestly, it's been the generosity of these companies, someone like Marco and this company Swell Cycle, who have offered to help. So we raised $30,000 for Marco's. It was actually Marco who was able to bring that funding directly. He was able to unlock that funding from a contact he had. But we've been just kind of doing this in like a grassroots community driven way so far. The phase that we're in, which is going to cost us about $50,000, is to create a full inventory of each bone and what treatment each bone is going to need. That's going to give us a final cost, combined with the cost of the armature that we need to rebuild. That's the metal structure that holds it up. I estimate this project's probably going to land in somewhere in the $1 million to $2 million range. So if there's anybody on the line who's interested in getting involved in making this happen, I would love to talk to you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll remind the audience again, we'd love to have your questions. A lot of us grew up with Seymour Center. Take your kids there. Kids grew up there. Have fond memories of this place, right? It's amazing to see it changing. And if you have questions about or comments about how you'd like to see that change or what sort of displays you'd like to see, I'm sure Jonathan would love to hear from you. So give us your questions in the Q&A box. We have a question from Liz. How do you propose to sort the hospital trays from the waste stream? That sorting is what has stymied many recycling programs back east.
Yeah, great question. So we would actually source it directly from the hospital. So it wouldn't even enter the recycling program. We would essentially go pick it up from their loading dock. Yeah,
I guess so. There's enough hospital trays being discarded that this could be a source for product development.
Yeah, I don't. Turns out hospitals go through a lot of trays. I think it probably has something to do with health code.
Yeah.
And it turns out hospital trays are made with a kind of plastic that's quite durable.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I have a question. Oh, okay. So Patty has a question. Very cool work at the center. Thank you. Which one was the lie?
All right. So I was like, won awards for my ice cream making. My name is on Mars, and I saved a family from a burning car. The lie is I have not won any awards for my ice cream making. I do make ice cream, but I have not won any awards for it, except for my son. He thinks it's great. So there you go. My name's on Mars because NASA had this promotion for the last rover that they sent up, where you could buy a ticket and they would etch your name microscopically on a panel. So I did that. So my name's is on Mars, and the car story is a story for another day when I can hold a beer and sit with you for real.
Wow. That's amazing. I have my own question about, so, when Miss Blue washed up, I mean, it seems like that doesn't happen often. Probably most whales die in the ocean and then they go to the bottom of the ocean or something else happens. So it's like, what is the probability of having a whale wash up like that? And I mean, that seems like such a special event that happened, and it's like, it seems like kind of rare, or maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, great question. Some of you may be wondering, well, why don't we just go get another whale? And the truth of the matter is, we theoretically could, but blue whale strandings are incredibly rare. It's a decadal event at best, and we really don't know. There's no way to know. Whales do wash ashore frequently, especially those that come close to shore. So humpbacks, gray whales, those do wash in and get beached more frequently. Blue whales stay really deep. They don't come close to shore. And when they die, they sink to the ocean floor most of the time. So it's just very rare. It's very rare for a blue whale to wash up. And even if one did wash up, for if we wanted to say, start to prepare another blue whale, A, we don't know when that would happen. B, it was a different time in the 1970s, and the rules and regulations were different, as my understanding. And so I actually don't know what it would take right now to prepare it, capture it, process it, how much that would cost, how long that would take. So theoretically, we could get on this waiting list. We could have claim to prepare the next blue whale that washes up in this region of our coast. As part of the stranding network, we could put our name on this waiting list, but we can't rely on that. And I'm not even sure I would do it again, frankly, if it washed up.
Thank you.
We have a question from Tom. Can you comment on plans for the other whale skeleton on campus, Mr. Gray?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, we've got a gray whale that's closer to the overlook point down there. If you've seen the gray whale lately, you've probably noticed that it doesn't have a head. But we plan to recapitate it very, very soon. So that one had the same issue. Essentially, it was the metal structure that had rusted away, and we were concerned about collapse. What's interesting about the gray? Couple things. A, that is not an individual animal. That is a Frankenstein gray whale. So that comes from several animals. And gray whales wash up quite a bit more frequently, so it's a little less unique in terms of the the display itself. But the way that they prepared it initially was different than the blue whale, and so the bones themselves are actually in better condition than the blue whale. They essentially submerged the bones in this epoxy resin that consolidated the bone matter, but left it exposed, and so there wasn't moisture that was trapped inside these shells. So the bones themselves are in pretty good shape. So we're just getting our act together to rebuild the metal armature and remount it in its current location.
Got it. Thank you. There's a question from Bill and Charlene. Amazing presentation. Thanks. Can you say more about educating and motivating pre-college students, including junior college, to prepare to join the climate change economy?
Yeah. Hi, Bill and Char. I'm glad you joined. Well, right now, our bread and butter in terms of our audience is kind of that K through 8, that K through 8 audience. That's really where we're focused in terms of our youth programs. That's not to say that that teens and early college students don't have a home. And honestly, one of the primary techniques that we are trying to use right now, Bill and Shar, right now, is to create a place. It's a place-making strategy. It's to create a place for those nerdy teens who love science and love the ocean and don't really have a home away from home, and create a space where they feel welcome, where they can come and create their own experiences and create their own community, where they always have a place to go after school to hang out. A lot of our strategy is creating a place where they feel welcome and they feel like their skills and their interests are valued and understood and seen. So we're creating a more warm and welcoming place for those folks to come and spend time. Now, one of the programs that we've seen at other institutions that has been successful that I've considered, now we don't have any momentum on this right now, is to do essentially a college prep program, right? So you take really motivated high school students from the community and give them direct access to some of the leading scientists on campus and in the region, and essentially get supercharged their landing into their undergraduate education. That is something that other institutions do and have done successfully. Something I've considered too. It would take some funding to launch a pilot like that. We would need to also sort out the market for it. I think it probably exists, but it's an option on the table. For the last 25 years, I should say that, again, our focus has been on that younger audience, and there's an opportunity to do more with older kids.
Great, thank you.
Okay, a couple of comments here from Liz. First, Liz just wants to thank you for your outstanding presentation. She says, very thought-provoking. Thank you. Thank the presenter for his enthusiasm. So thank you, Liz. And Liz also asked, I don't know if you have experience or knowledge about this, but does the recycling program in Santa Cruz actually recycle, or does the recycled material wind up in landfills? Big question all around the country, I'm sure.
I'm friends with the people at the recycling center, so I'm going to direct you to them. But look, I think the fact of the matter is some proportion of it does get recycled and some doesn't. I don't actually know what percentage it is. But I don't want to speak for my colleagues at the recycling center.
All right. Well, there seem to be no other open questions.
Okay.
So,
I got a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I've got one more, and I'm curious, Jonathan, about your just your career trajectory. You talked about that a little bit at the beginning, but your path from academic to tech startup to fundraising for a museum to running a museum, right? How you're blending all of these experiences. I can see this in your talk, taking a science-based approach and taking a tech rapid prototyping approach. I'm curious to see where your career's been and where it's going.
Well, thanks for asking. Look, I'd be lying if I told you that this was all mapped out when I was 22 coming out of college. Look, I've always focused on acquiring skills as opposed to, say, subject matter expertise. That's been my approach. Is what are skills that are highly transferable, just as like a sort of a career safety, right, approach of what are skills that can be used in any industry. So I use my people skills and my research skills to parlay that to a role in a tech company. I grew at that company and learned how to build a business, learned how to run a business, learned how to take care of customers, build teams, manage teams, and some of the tools of the trade in tech. Those are all skills that were transferable. And then in the museum industry, I learned how to tell stories. I learned how to appeal to hearts. I learned how to create places. I learned how to. I learned what it looked like for myself to be invested in my own community and to dedicate my time to it. So when you put all those things together, an understanding of research and academics and science, an understanding of building businesses and building teams, and a passion for building public spaces and memorable experiences that impact my own community and my own kid. That's when the opportunity arose. I saw all those things kind of come together, and that's why I went for it. And I don't know, honestly, I don't know what comes next. I got a lot of work to do at the Seymour Center. So there's a lot of unfinished business there.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think your story can be inspiring to a lot of our students and alumni, right? We have a lot of discussions about what sort of careers are available to social scientists, to such as yourself when you were first in school. So
Yeah. Thank you so much. And there's Cheryl says bravo.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
All right. So I do have some closing remarks. So hi, everyone. Again, my name is April Yee, like Mike mentioned before. I'm currently on the UC Santa Cruz Alumni Council as the VP of Finance and one of the volunteer organizers for Slugs and Steins, this lecture series. So please join me in applause for Jonathan Hicken. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for sharing this information with us this evening. This talk was recorded and it will appear in a few days on the UCSC Arts, Lectures, and Entertainment channel on YouTube. And please consider making a donation to support the Seymour Center. And our thanks also to the staff of the Alumni Relations and Special Events offices who organized this webinar. Thank you, Shayna, Diana, Paulina, Nicole, and Kristen. And also thank you to David Hansen, Julia Doloff, and Anna Gururajan, who are co-organizers of this series. And our next Slugs and Steins will be on Monday evening, August 12th, with Professors Jeanette Dinishak and Namira Akhtar, who will be co-presenting a talk titled Learning About Autism from Autistic People. And most of the research on autism is conducted by non-autistic people, and the neurodiversity movement centers autistic perspectives, which contributes to a better understanding of autistic experiences and can counteract existing stereotypes about autistic people. And in the presentation, they'll discuss 2 methods for centering autistic perspectives on autism, including autistic people on research teams and reading autistic autobiographies, and explore several potential benefits of doing so. Meanwhile, UCSC has other exciting events awaiting. In 2 days, on Wednesday, July 10th, there's an event called Cancer in the Crosshairs. It's from 6 p.m. to 7:45 at the Seymour Marine Discovery Center and features 3 short accessible presentations about the impactful research happening at UCSC in the fight against breast and ovarian cancer. And on July 13th, from 7:30 to 9:30 p.m. at the Quarry Amphitheater, you can see a screening of the newly restored concert film, Stop Making Sense, featuring the Talking Heads. You can make a whole day of it. And finally, don't forget to register for the 2024 edition of Return to the Redwoods. And this is a one-of-a-kind reunion where we invite all alumni and their friends and families to a weekend-long series of events, complete with on-campus housing. And this year, it will be at Porter College in the dorms and apartments. And that takes place August 16th through 18th. And you can register at the links provided in the chat. And so on behalf of the UC Santa Cruz Alumni Association, thank you for joining us. And please come back on August 12th at 6:30 for our next virtual event. See you then.